According to a new survey put out by Royal LePage today, 6 out of 10 millennials still believe they will be able to buy a home in the future. So in today's video, we're going to discuss Canada's most terrifying question. Should you buy a house in 2022? The definitive guide on how to manage your credit, product, and elite price in that order. It's never been more important to get your mortgage right. Alright, so welcome back. Today we're discussing Canada's most terrifying question. Should I buy a home in 2022? That is the question on the minds of many millennials, and really it's a tough question at the moment. We have rising interest rates, we have falling home values, and we have a whole bunch of uncertainty and a lack of clarity around what's happening in the real estate market. So the question is, how does somebody decide for themselves whether or not they should be buying a home? And that's what we're going to discuss in today's video. But before we get into it, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And by the way, if you are one of those people who's considering buying a home and doesn't know what to do, where to turn, or whether or not it's the right decision for you, I totally get it. So we put together a resource for you that I'll discuss at the very end of this video. If you want to stick around and hear about that, by all means do. This is going to be something that will help make that buying decision significantly easier for you and will also make it easier throughout the process to make sure that you don't get taken advantage of and that you don't spend too much money. Okay, so let's start first and foremost by jumping you into the most recent article. This is on BNN Bloomberg. Millennials still determined to own a house survey finds. This is a survey conducted by Royal LePage of Canada. And in the survey, they polled 2,003 Canadians aged 26 to 41, of which 68% of non-homeowners say buying a house is an important life goal to them. So 6 out of 10 people still believe that they will be able to buy a home in the future. And more importantly, 72% of Canadian millennials would want to buy a home in their current city if the cost of living was not a problem. Break this out into Vancouver, you have 58%, Montreal 54%, and Toronto 48%. So to break this out and make it a little more simple, basically, millennials are realizing that if they could buy a home and be able to afford it, they probably would, and they would probably want to. So that leads to an interesting conversation around whether or not it makes sense for somebody to buy a home, and how do you make that decision with respect to buying if you're not exactly sure whether or not you should be doing it. And this is a tough question to answer right now, right? You have a lot of people who don't know whether or not they can afford a home. They're worried about higher interest rates. They're worried about home values falling and how this all would affect them. So in today's video, I wanted to create some clarity around this and talk about the reasons why you probably won't want to buy a home in 2022. And hopefully at the end of this video, you will have complete clarity on whether or not buying at the end of this year is the right thing for you. So I've put together 5 reasons why you may not want to buy in 2022. These are the reasons, in my opinion, that you would not want to buy in this market. So first and foremost, you shouldn't buy a home in Canada in 2022 if you feel like you are rushed. So in other words, if you feel like you have no other option but to buy, because if you don't, interest rates are going to go up, housing prices are going to be out of your reach, and you need to do it now or you never will be able to. Well, the reality is you will be able to buy a home at some point in the future that is within the realm of reasonability for you. In other words, if you're smart about it, you will be able to own a home at some point in the future and you will be able to afford it. But here's the thing, you don't want to be rushed into this process, because what happens when you're rushed into this process is you find out that the cost of owning a home is significantly more than you could have ever imagined. Things like maintenance costs, things like higher payments on mortgages. Basically, people jump in, they ask, what's my biggest mortgage that I can qualify for? And they never really ask about the payments and the budgets. So as a rule of thumb, you want to make sure that this is a well thought out process. Don't just jump into it because you see something you like and impulse buy a condo or a house that may not be something that you want to live in for the long term. Oh, and by the way, whenever you're making a buying decision, you should be buying with the long term in mind. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Second of all, you probably shouldn't buy a house if you're not sure what you can afford. So this does not mean going to a mortgage broker or a bank and saying, what do I qualify for? What can I afford? And then when they say, hey, you qualify for an $800,000 mortgage, going out and purchasing a really big property. No, you need to be smarter about it than that. You need to understand what the payments will be. You need to understand what the taxes on the property will be. You need to understand what the maintenance costs will be. You need to understand what the cost to heat the home will be and to run the electricity in the home. Because all of these things are things that you don't think think about until you actually get the bill the first month after you've bought the property. So you need to make sure you're meticulous about making sure you don't have any blind spots with respect to the cost of the home. Now, as a general rule of thumb, what I like to say is no more than 25% of your income should be going towards your mortgage payment. Yes, most banks and lenders look at 32 to 35% of your income going towards your total housing expenses, but I like to use 25% as a rule of thumb with respect to the amount of your income that should be going to your actual mortgage payment. Then add on another 5 to 7% for all your other housing costs, and that should give you a pretty good number. By the way, one thing I caution people against is going into a scenario where 40 to 45% of your income is going towards your total debt servicing. So in other words, your car payments, your credit card payments, all your mortgage costs and your living costs and all of that. Because after the tax man gets his share of your money and after you've spent all the money on your Starbucks and everything else, it can get really tight really fast. In fact, we found ourselves in that situation 10 years ago when we bought, not realizing, even though we were in the industry, exactly how much it costs to own a home. So make sure you know what you can afford, and make sure when you're going through these numbers that not only are you making sure you can afford the property, but you're doing it while also setting some money aside for your future, whether that's retirement or whether it's for things that could go wrong potentially with your property. Now, third, you might not want to buy in 2022 if you are going to move in the near future. We're seeing values come down across the country. I'll talk a little bit more about values later on, but we're seeing values come down and the market is just volatile right now, which means if you are planning on moving in the next 2 to 3 years, you may find yourself in a situation where your home's not worth what it is today, so it may be worth it not to purchase. Now, this all comes down to short-term versus long-term decision making. If you are buying a home with the long-term in mind, then you can absolutely buy a home in 2022 and do it knowing that interest rates are going up and housing values are falling, because you're going to be able to put yourself in a situation where you know you can afford the property for the long term, and that even if there's something that happens in the economy or you lose your job or so on and so forth, you're still going to be able to maintain ownership of that property. But if you're going to move in a very short period of time, well, you have to use short-term thinking. And with short-term thinking, you have to consider volatility, which you can pretty much ignore if you're buying for the long term. But in the short term, if volatility is as crazy as it is right now, well, you may want to reconsider buying this year, because if those housing values fall, you may find yourself in a situation where you cannot afford to make the move that you were planning on making. So be very cognizant of that unless you have an employer that's willing to pay your expenses and any losses on the property. If you've got the potential where you may want to ship to another province or another city, be very mindful of that. Now, if you're moving within the same city, you can probably make more of a medium-term decision where you may decide that you want to buy anyways because you know that you're going to be staying in the same city and you can sort of deal with any fluctuations in property values. But for the most part, if you're planning on making a move, make sure that you understand that you have a significant amount of volatility in the Canadian real estate market right now. Now, fourth, you're afraid of rising interest rates. So this is an interesting one because we're kind of nearing what a lot of people believe is the top of that interest rate scenario. There was an article in the Financial Post this week talking about interest rates may be near the top. So you may not have to worry about this one too much. But here's what's important about being afraid of rising interest rates. First and foremost, run your affordability scenario using today's rates, but then also run it using 1% higher, 2% higher, 3% higher. See what the future would look like at higher interest rates. By the way, you can do that by using my mortgage app that's linked in the description below. But the most important thing to understand here is what your payments would look like in a higher interest rate scenario. And once you understand that, you can start to look at your finances, look at your living expenses and say, hey, if those interest rates went up 2 or 3%, I could probably afford it. In fact, the government has pretty much made it so you have to do this anyways by implementing what they call the stress test, which is where you have to qualify at a higher interest rate than what you're paying. So while that's a number that's happening behind the scenes, it makes sense to ask your broker or your banker or figure out for yourself what your payment would be at the stress test rate. And also understand that central banks have a tendency to overshoot, and as interest rates go up, there's almost certainty that they will come back down at some point in the future. Now, last but not least, the last reason why you shouldn't buy a home in 2022 is you're afraid of falling values. So if you're thinking with the short term in mind and you're fearful of falling values, then yes, you should probably stay the heck out of the market. But if you're buying with long-term intentions, you can probably start to look for opportunities now to find a really good deal on a home that you want. Now, here's the key thing. If you are buying a home that meets your needs for the next 5, 10, 15 years, it's one that you would be proud to live in and live in for the long term, then really falling home values don't make a ton of difference, because at the end of 15 to 25 years, all these peaks and valleys in today's market will just be a blip on the radar. If you go back and you take a look at a chart from the last 25 years, you can see there was big peaks and valleys 25 years ago if you look at them up close, but if you look at them over an extended period of time, they're very, very, very small blips on the radar. So with long-term thinking in mind, what seems like big fluctuations up and down are probably not going to be significant fluctuations over the long term. So the key thing is to buy when you're ready and buy a home that you want to live in long term. And you never know when this market's going to turn. I think there's probably a little bit of downward pressure left to be had, but as long as you aren't buying at the top, which is clearly past us, then you'll probably be making a pretty good purchasing decision long term. So those are the 5 reasons why you may not want to buy a home in 2022. Now, at the beginning of this video, I said we had a tool that will help create some clarity. And here's the thing. If you're buying a home in 2022 or 2023 or 2024 or anywhere beyond that, the most important key to your success is going to be how educated you are on the process. Because what we found out in 2020 and 2021 is that if you take a realtor's word for it, if you take a family member's word for it, if you take a mortgage broker's word for it, or a friend's word for it, you're probably going to find yourself in a position where you're pressured into buying a home, and you may end up doing it at the wrong time. Think about all those people in Ontario that bought for $200,000 to $300,000 over what their properties are now worth, because they thought that if they didn't get in right now, they wouldn't get in at all. So here's the thing going forward. You need to understand the process. And the thing that will prevent you from making a bad decision is your level of education with respect to buying a home. And I've gone out and I've looked and I've read all the books. I've taken all the courses. I've talked to all the realtors. I used to run a real estate company. I obviously run a mortgage brokerage now. And what I've realized is that there's no real concise place to find really good information for a consumer. Most people rely on the realtor and their family members, and that's okay. But I wanted to give people an opportunity to go somewhere and find the information they need for the stage in the process that they find themselves in at that moment. So I've created what we call the Home Buyer Masterclass. This is designed to be a modular course where you can go in and you can say, okay, I'm at the down payment saving stage, or I'm at the pre-approval stage, or I'm at the searching for a home stage, or I'm at the go to the lawyer stage, or I'm at the I finally closed on my property, now what do I need to know stage? And you can pull the information you need at the time that you need it. And the reason why I did this is because we've just seen so many people get taken advantage of over the last couple of years. So this Home Buyer Masterclass, we're putting it on starting September 12th. We're going to do it in cohorts. So in other words, we're going to do it in groups. There's going to be 3 to 4 opportunities to get in per year. The first one, like I said, is September 12th. If you decide that you want to sign up for it today, it costs $47 times 3 payments. And if for whatever reason today isn't the right day for you, you can still get in with an early bird price up to August 31st. The last opportunity to sign up for this cohort will be September 11th, and then we'll start on the 12th. And as a member of the founding cohort of the Home Buyer Masterclass, you're going to be able to help shape where we go with this product. So like I said, it's designed to be completely modular, whether you are at the beginning stages or the final stages of buying a home. There's going to be information in there that will apply to you. We're also going to have a whole bunch of insider secrets, things like negotiation tactics and questions you should be asking your realtor, how to select your realtor to make sure that you aren't getting taken advantage of. Same thing with a mortgage broker and everything else. And it's my belief that the Home Buyer Masterclass is going to save anybody who takes it probably at least $1,000 to $10,000 to maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars by making sure that they are super informed on the process. So this is my offer to you. If you want to go to homebuyermasterclass.ca, you can sign up today for a super, super low price. And if not, whenever you're ready, you can come back and join a future cohort. But even if you sign up today and you're 6 months out or a year out or 2 years out, you're going to have access to this throughout your entire process. So you're going to be able to have access to the information and use it as you need it as you go through that journey of buying a home. So again, go to homebuyermasterclass.ca if you'd like to sign up. And as usual, if you found this video useful, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video, and we'll see you on the very next one. Cheers.